There's this quiet voice in the back of your head. You know the one I'm talking about. The one that says you didn't have it that bad. People out there had it much worse. You don't have the right to complain, and you should just get over it. So you've been watching videos and listening to podcasts, and you keep hearing of these catastrophic stories of abuse and war and just really horrific stuff. And that voice keeps saying, this wasn't me. That wasn't my life. I didn't go through those things. But your life isn't exactly smooth sailing either. You're dealing with anxiety or depression. Maybe you're trying to break patterns that no matter how hard you try, you just can't get past them. You see, there's a tension there. On one side, your life wasn't that bad. On the other side, why do I feel like this? Why does it seem like something's wrong with me? And that's a common feeling that trauma psychology has been dancing around for years without quite landing and explaining well. You see, the reason people don't typically get clarity around this is because the frameworks you've been given, they weren't made for you. They were made for people who've been through those extreme experiences. And if any of this is landing for you, you're the exact person this video is for. So before I jump into explaining things, you need to understand where all of this is coming from. When I first started on my own personal healing journey, I would listen to podcasts and videos, and I was trying to educate myself, but the bigger thing that I was trying to do was to trigger myself. I was trying to get to a point where I had feelings come up because I was very shut down. And I just wanted a good cry and just to feel about something and really get things flowing again. And so I would listen to these podcasts. And it was always this horrific, super extreme stuff that, frankly, I didn't relate to. My story's a bit unusual, so there aren't too many stories out there like mine. The thing is I would get to the end of the podcast, and these people would start going over their symptoms and things that they had been dealing with in their day-to-day lives. And I related to a lot of it. Some of it was as severe, some of it wasn't quite as bad, but somewhere on the spectrum, I could relate to the things they were dealing with in their day-to-day life. And it started to just blow my mind. Like, how is this even possible? I don't have this person's life, yet I'm dealing with a lot of the same symptoms. And so to make sense of all of this, I got out pen and paper and I just went to town. And I came up with what I call the dynamic trauma spectrum. And you really need to understand this because it explains the nuances of what might be going on with you. Let's start looking at the dynamic trauma spectrum. So on the horizontal axis, you're going to have time. And this is going to be referring to the moment that something traumatic might have happened in your life. But it's also accounting for any time between that moment all the way up to today. So it's really, when did it impact you? And then the second is, or the vertical axis is going to be impact. How did something actually affect you internally? So there's a gentleman named Dr. Gabor Mate. He was a medical doctor for about 40 years. He's largely considered an expert on trauma and addiction. His definition of trauma is that trauma is not what happened to you, it's what happened inside of you as a result of what happened to you. So it's not the event, it's the impact that it had within you. So we're going to define that as impact. And then obviously you have high up here, low down here. Now, this next part, if you've been around healing and trauma work and just personal growth, you've probably already heard of these first two. One is going to be big T trauma, and the other is going to be little t trauma. Now, just real quickly, in case you haven't heard of this, big T trauma is what people typically think of when they think of trauma. So that big catastrophic stuff, the abuse, war, things like that. And then little t trauma is kind of everything else. Hence, this is the reason that people like myself and other professionals out there hate the terminology big T and little t trauma. The problem is that it's very dismissive and diminishing to someone's experience. Because let's face it, maybe you didn't have some big T trauma thing up here. But just because the impact of something wasn't that big doesn't mean it's all the way down here. So sometimes in life you have kind of these things that are just outside of big T trauma. They're significantly impactful, but they don't fit the big T kind of narrative, if you will. And so it can be very dismissive and diminishing. And basically what happens is that people start to minimize what actually happened. We're going to take the big T and little t trauma and we're just going to throw it away. Let's get rid of it, blow it up. We don't even care about that. I just wanted to explain that to you because a lot of people already know that framework. And now I'm going to explain it in a different way that actually makes more sense and what I think people were actually trying to do when they first came up with the terminology big T and little t trauma. So what we have here are the two different types, and it's what I refer to as immediate impact trauma. So once again, it's that big T type category, so that catastrophic stuff. It usually are these big events that happen once and then they're kind of over. Obviously, there's lingering effects, and it does dramatically impact somebody, but they're immediate. They're right here, right now. And then you have slow burn impact. And this is exactly what it sounds like. It's a slow burn. It doesn't hit you all immediately. It typically builds and builds and builds and builds, and that's when it becomes truly impactful and starts messing with all the different aspects of your life. So let's actually graph this out and I'll show you how this actually shows up for people. So let's take something common that maybe happens in childhood. And let's get a different color here. And so maybe you have a kid that is being teased or bullied by, let's just say, family members, right? A siblings making fun of them. And so you have this kind of initial wound. Now, everyone has wounds. And if this person had had people in their lives teaching them how to become emotionally mature and working with emotions, then this would have never turned into a trauma. But obviously this person didn't. And so this initial wound happens, and then, I don't know, maybe they start going to preschool a little while later, and they get made fun of, so a little bit of time passes, and this initial wound becomes a little bit more severe. Then they go to middle school, and the same thing happens. They get made fun of it again. They keep getting teased about this thing. And then high school and college, and they start dating somebody who really makes fun of them and makes them feel like crap about it. More time goes by, they get a job. That makes it worse. Maybe they have a few friends who keep making fun of them. More time goes by. And now this person is here as an adult. And you see how the impact has impacted them throughout time, it kept getting worse and worse and worse because it was piled on top and piled on top and piled on top. And what happens is this person gets to adulthood and they start wondering, what's wrong with me? And here's where people get tripped up. They get told to go look in your past. And they look at this event and they think, well, that's not that big of a deal. I don't have the right to feel the way that I feel. I wasn't dealing with something up here as a child. I was dealing with this. And what they don't see is all of this. They don't see all the times that wound was triggered and reopened and thrown in their face. The truth is that the wounds that we get as a child, they don't just sit there. There is a reason that I didn't name this the trauma spectrum and I named it the dynamic trauma spectrum. Because a lot of people think that trauma is stagnant. It's just this thing that happened. And sometimes when you can have bigger, one-off events, sure. But the impact, remember, we're talking about impact here. That impact's never stagnant. You're either growing, right? Helping yourself heal and move past stuff, right? Or it's getting worse. Even if that wound isn't necessarily getting touched, you're spending all this time protecting it. And so this is what gets people stuck. You also have the opposite side of this, where people, they start to work on themselves and all they see is this. It's not that big of a deal. So what? I'm a little annoyed by this. I'm a little bit annoyed by that. And then they sit down with a therapist and maybe the therapist does tell them this. It doesn't make any sense to them. What do you mean this stupid little thing that happened is why I'm annoyed about this other stuff over here? Because once again, they're not seeing the impact that it's had throughout the years. And this is why this little t trauma doesn't make any sense. And why I refer to it as slow burn trauma. Because you can't sit there and tell me that something that was maybe minor when it first happened, that's been reopened and reopened and reopened and reopened, doesn't have the same impact as a big T trauma. And the reality is that people don't see is that it's either something that happens immediately, right? So something just run over, or the slow burn is death by 1,000 cuts. And so we think because the initial event was small, that it can't have a huge impact. It's really, if you understand compound interest, it's perfect for trauma, especially slow burn trauma. So understand that the reason you feel like you don't have the right to feel the way you do, and people had it much worse, is because you're coming up here and you're looking at people with this big T, or what I call immediate impact trauma, and you're looking at these catastrophic external event and saying, well, my external event wasn't that bad. And ignoring the impact that those things can have, especially over time. And then the next layer of this is realizing that a lot of this is your brain doing what it was designed to do and being awesome. Because your brain saw these little moments that you were having as a kid, or even big moments, or some moments here in the middle, because it really doesn't matter. You can have very severe stuff happen, that high impact trauma or slow burn trauma, and your brain's going to do the same thing. Keep you safe, keep you out of a place of overwhelm. And what is the best way for it to do that? Either A, especially with big T trauma type stuff, just to get you to completely forget about it. There's plenty of people who do a lot of trauma work and then realize that some major thing happened in their life that they didn't remember. This is what disassociation is. We disassociate it. This is why people get addicted to stuff. This is why, people don't like stillness and they pick up their phone immediately because they need to do something. Because if they don't, they'll have to start feeling what is there, and a lot of this stuff will come up. So our brains are protecting us. And if you have slow burn trauma, guess what your brain commonly does? Plays it down. It wasn't that bad. It's not that severe. You should just get over it. That is your brain trying to trick you. And not purposefully, but to keep you from feeling that pain. Because your brain's still convinced that you're somewhere down here as a kid. It doesn't realize that all these years have gone by and now you're an adult. The point of this video was to try to help you have some clarity, especially if you feel like other people had it so bad and you don't have the right. You have the right to feel however you feel. No one knows what it's like to be you. No one feels feelings and sensations through your body. Whenever you have that thought of, I didn't have it that bad, there should be an alarm going off in your mind, because it should be telling you, oh, that's what my brain's doing, because it knows there's something here for me to feel. Just sit with it. You don't need to change anything or spend all your time figuring it out. If you want, draw this out for yourself. Start looking at where your trauma kind of falls. Is it more of the slow burn? Is it more of the immediate impact trauma? And then start seeing all the different ways that it's impacted you. Because once you really lay this out for yourself, like I did at one point for myself, it becomes undeniable. You realize exactly what you're doing. I hope this helps you in some way. If you are looking for somebody to work through some of this stuff with, I do offer one-on-one coaching. It can be very difficult to start to really see your own patterns and your own blind spots, another technique our brain uses, on your own. So one way or another, whether it's me or somebody else, get some support. This stuff can be really difficult to go through on your own. I personally did a lot of healing on my own. Wish it wasn't that way, but those were the circumstances of my life at the time. So my friend, until next time, keep trusting your gut, keep trusting your intuition. See ya.